So here's the problem in organizations, in my opinion. And this applies to big organizations and to little organizations. Unconsciously, we tend to think of people as machines. We just unconsciously make the connection that people will operate in much the same way machines do. Actually, at this stage in our evolution, we tend to think of people as computers, which is people on, machines on steroids, meaning we expect that people should be able to perform for long periods of time continuously at very high speeds and run multiple programs at the same time. Well, here's the problem with that. Human beings aren't designed to do that. Human beings are meant to be oscillatory beings in an oscillatory universe. Why do I say that? It's just I like the way it sounds. It means that we're meant to pulse. We're meant to make waves. We are rhythmic beings. We are periodic beings. We are designed to move between the expenditure of energy and the renewal of energy. So the notion of recovery is that we are meant, think about the different functions of the body. The heart rate oscillates. The brain waves. Eyes blink. Muscles contract in response to a demand, and then they relax when the demand is over. Unless you experience the stress psychologically as unending, in which case the muscle doesn't relax, and you've got what? Yeah, you've got spasm, you've got back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain. And then you go to 100 different doctors, and they tell you, they take MRIs of you, and they show you that you have a herniated disc. I'm here to tell you, big deal. So do 70% of all men over 50, and most of them aren't feeling any pain. That has nothing to do with your pain. The pain is the spasm. The pain is the failure of the muscle to relax. It's the failure of recovery. That's the problem. So what you want to do is you want to build a rhythmic relationship in your life between expenditure and recovery. Okay, so now you got to ask yourself the question, how much recovery? I got a lot of hassle from somebody at Canyon Ranch yesterday about using the word recovery, because they said, God, it's so associated with, the 12-step program and coming back from addiction and so on. I don't mind that, but let's call it renewal, rejuvenation. So how long do you renew? How much time do you spend? Well, during the day, there's a rhythm in our life that's called the ultradian rhythm. The ultradian rhythm is a subset of the circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm, most of you know, is the rhythm of day and night. So at night, you're supposed to sleep, and during the day, you're supposed to be awake. If you screw with that, you do it at your own peril. Shift workers never, ever get it fully adapt to working when the body wants you to be asleep. That's why they have higher injury rates, higher accidents, more healthcare problems, less productivity. It's just a given. The body is designed to move like this and at those times. The ultradian rhythm is the daytime version of that circadian rhythm, which is essentially this. If you go and had a nice little break for 10 minutes just now, and you had something to eat, and you didn't jump on your BlackBerry and answer email during the entire break, I know none of you did that, and you had a good conversation with someone that was pleasant, and then what you did was you got some renewal. And what you came back into the room with was a high state of physiological arousal. You were at your physiological best, or you had replenished the system to some significant degree. Over the course of the 90 minutes that follow, and we're about halfway through them now, you will slowly fall down, no matter what happens, into a physiological trough. Your body at the end of 90 minutes will be screaming at you, what? Give me a break. But you won't normally, particularly when you're home working. You'll push through it. How? You will call on your emergency system, your fight or flight system. You'll call on the stress hormones that are the body's natural speed. They're speed, and speed kills. cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline. You'll call it up. You'll use it the way a driver on a highway gets a flat tire and puts that little small tire on the car and then drives 300 miles at 75 miles an hour with the small tire. You can do it, but at your peril. It's not meant to be used that way, that system. So what you really want to do is begin to get sensitive, aware of the need for renewal. How do you think you do that? Practice. Practice. Now, practice is partly awareness. What lets you know that you need a break? What are the signs that you need a break? You yawn. You yawn. What else? Pardon me? Yeah, you don't focus as well. You can't think. You can't listen as well. What else? Pardon me? Right, your mood goes negative. You start to get frustrated, irritable. My voice starts to sound irritating where it was okay at the beginning. You're impatient, that kind of thing. Yeah, focus. We said that, focus, right. You lose focus. And what about physically what happens to you besides tired? Thirsty. What else? Yes, hunger. What else? Fidget. When you start to move like this in the seat. So all of these are signs for you, if you pay attention to them, that your body wants a break. Everything starts physiologically. If you can't get the physiological stuff in order, everything else suffers. So you've got to take these signals seriously. So it's not the quantity of your recovery that matters. It's not the quantity of your recovery that matters, it's the quality of your recovery. That's why you have to train recovery. You need to train it because you can quote, renew for 2 hours and get nothing out of your renewal. Or you can renew for a very short period of time and get a powerful dose of renewal. Actually, let me just tell this story. I'll come to the book story right after it, but I have to act it out in order to make it interesting. Otherwise, it's fabulously dull. So when we really got this understanding of renewal, it was, again, through the athletes, and it was specifically through the tennis players, because tennis players were geniuses, the best of them at recovery. And this is how we discovered it. We would, particularly my partner, would be watching tennis players to try to figure out where things were going wrong, and particularly to distinguish what separated the great players from the near-great players. And we had the luxury of being able to see the number 1, number 2, number 5 player, and then the number 70, 80, 90 player. So the distinctions between these players, when you're just watching them hit the ball, are very, very small. But somehow Roger Federer or Rafael Nadal wins over and over and over again when it comes down to the key matches of a tournament. Even though if you actually look at their strokes, they're pretty darn similar to the number 60 or 80 or 200. Okay, so we're watching this for literally months and months to try to see if we can define the things that separate the top players from the next level. And it's hopeless. We can't do it. And finally, one day, Jim has this great insight when we have number 1 and number 2 on the court playing each other. Number 1 and number 2 in the world playing each other, hitting the ball, playing a match. And here's what he discovers. During the time between points, meaning the 20 to 25 seconds after a point ends before the next one starts, each of these 2 players are doing the same set of 4 activities, exactly the same set of 4 activities. No other player does them, virtually no other player he's ever seen does them, and neither of them are aware they're doing them. What do you think they're accomplishing? Recovery, exactly. So what is it that they do? Okay, so the first thing is the point ends, the player hits the shot, and he turns away from the net. Why? Let it go. It's the energy serenity prayer, we call it. Don't invest your energy where it won't do you any good. Invest your energy where it will make a difference. Don't invest your energy where it won't, and have the wisdom to know the difference. In other words, once a point is over, and this metaphor really applies to your life, big time. Once a point is over, it's over. Any further energy expended there, except at some point in the future to reflect on lessons learned, is a waste of your energy. So why would you spend it? But we all do it all the time, don't we? Great players don't do it. They let it go. There's a great story about Barry Diller, who now runs IAC, the Interactive Corporation, and was at that point trying to buy CBS. This is 10, 15 years ago. And at the very last, he thinks he has it, and it's a lifelong dream for him that he's going to get it. At the last minute, in swoops Sumner Redstone, and he buys it. He offers a bigger price and buys it out from under Barry Diller. Next day, the reporters are talking to Barry about what happened, and they say, so Barry, you must be incredibly depressed. What are you thinking about all this? He says, they won, we lost, next. That is excellent energy management. Excellent energy management. What for? Why am I going to sit here and regret? Why am I going to obsess about this? It's not going to get me anything. Second thing they do, they switch the racket from the dominant hand to the non-dominant hand. Why? Recover, let the muscles relax. If you hold on to the racket all the way through a 3 or 4 hour match and the other person keeps putting it in his other hand and letting it relax, who do you think is going to have more strength left in that arm at the end of 4 hours? It's a no-brainer. Third thing that they do is, as they're walking toward the backcourt, they're playing with the strings of their racket, right? You've all seen that? They're not fixing their strings. Strings are fine. What are they doing? No, they're not going over the next point in their mind because they don't think about the next point. Athletes don't spend time thinking in that cognitive way. The most they do, let me just say this, the most they would do is a single word. Rush net. That's 2 words. Move toward the net. Relax. Something very small, because they don't want the brain, which is way too complex, to get in the way of the body, which has its own genius. So no, it's not that. What is it? Exactly. So that they're not looking around and losing focus on the very narrow agenda that they have, which is to stay concentrated on seeing the ball in the next point. And they don't want to look at the crowd. They don't want to look at the umpire. They don't want to look at their opponent. They want to stay 100% focused. And the last thing they do is something that we came to call the Matador Walk. Here's how we came to call it the Matador Walk. When we were trying to understand what makes it possible for people to perform under extremely high pressure, we went and talked to a large group of matadors, because you really want to understand what performing under pressure is. Matador's a pretty good person to ask. Perform well, kill the bull. Perform badly, die. That's a pretty simple one. So we thought we'd learn a lot about how to deal with pressure. So we said, well, what are the kinds of things that they taught you when you were beginning to be a matador? And they said, oh my gosh, they didn't teach us anything about how to be matador. All they taught us to do was to walk with the look of courage. What is that? Well, that's this. It's shoulders back, it's head up, it's confident gaze forward. It's, whereas if you think of yourself in an athletic situation in your life, assume you've all had some athletics thing, and those of you who are sort of the weekend warrior types know this feeling after, you hit a bad golf shot, or something went wrong. Oh my God, I can't believe I did it again. I'm such a loser, blah, blah, blah. Why does it matter from the perspective of performance whether or not and recovery, whether or not you walk like a matador or you walk like a person who's half dead? Why does it make any difference? Well, because the mind and body are one. How you hold your body profoundly influences how you feel. I'd like everybody in the room for a moment to smile at me. Fake. Give me a nice big fake smile. Now I want you to think about how depressed you are. You can't do it, can you? No, because the body won't let you. And also, the opposite is true too. If I go like this, I do want to say I have some very inspiring things to say to you today. I have to say, thank you, Evan, for bringing me here. I'm pretty excited. I hope you are too. It's not going to do it. So there you go, 1, 2, 3, 4 behaviors, 25 seconds. Here's what we discover. When we hook them up to telemetry, when we start monitoring their heart rate from the side of the court, what we discover is that they are recovering, or they are dropping 20 heartbeats, 1 heartbeat per second, 20 heartbeats between points. If they go 25 heartbeats. Now that is an extraordinary level of recovery. That's a powerful recovery. If you try to do it, even if you're somebody who works out, and you look at your watch after, if you've got a heart rate monitor on, after 20 or 25 seconds, unless you are a professionally conditioned athlete, you'll be lucky if you recovered 5, 6, 7 heartbeats in those first 20 seconds. They were recovering 1 per second. So they went from 165 to 145. Now, you're in the 4th hour of the match, and you've been recovering back down to 145, 20 heartbeats consistently throughout the match, and your opponent has not been recovering at all. Hello? Recovery drives performance. Renewal drives performance. Fitness, I said earlier, fitness is the speed of recovery. So the fitter you are, the faster you recover, which means you want to train recovery in your life. And Evan asked me earlier, what does it mean to train recovery? That's like drawing the negative space in a picture. It's very counterintuitive. Well, the answer is you want to train your body to deeply relax. You want to train your physiology to calm down. You did it just with the breath. So you do the in-breath. Here's a powerful piece of recovery. I know we did this in-breath, but I want to deconstruct it for you just one step further. So just put your pens down for 1 second. You don't have to stand up. Stay seated. Feel your feet on the floor so that we know you're here as opposed to somewhere else. And now I want you to do one breath, actually. I want you to do one breath. No, we'll do a few. Here's how I'd like you to do the breath. I'd like you to do it with in to a count of 3 through your nose and out to a count of 6 through your mouth. Same way that Eben was talking about, meaning a deep diaphragmatic breath, but in through your nose to 3 and out through your mouth to a count of 6. So let's close our eyes and actually do just a few, and then I'll pull you back to the room, okay? Let's do it. Okay, you can come back to the room. So that's about 20 seconds. Do you notice a difference? Yes. So where did you get the recovery? Where was the recovery? What part of that experience? The exhale. That's what we don't do. We do not let the air out of the lungs. We don't invest in the recovery piece. We don't open the lungs so that they're completely empty and you're capable of breathing in. The lungs are half full in most of our breaths. So this piece, this recovery piece, is probably the most undervalued dimension of performance that exists among anything we've ever been able to recognize, and it's incredibly counterintuitive. So I want to give a 2-minute version of the story Eben was mentioning, which is how I wrote The Power of Full Engagement, because it'll bring it home for you in a way that's not, requiring you to be a tennis player professionally. So it turned out that when I wrote The Power of Full Engagement, I had, when we first signed the contract, a year to get it done. I had never done a book quicker than a year. I'd done several, but I'd never done one quicker than a year. And in this case, I had a lot of other things I needed to do during that period, so it was a little intimidating, but I didn't find it nerve-wracking because if the deadline was April 2002, officially, I treated it as April 2003, because that's what all writers do, miss your deadlines. So I didn't worry about it, and I started writing it I signed the contract in July of 2001. I had 10 months, actually, to do it. And I got to September, and of course, September 11th, 2001, changed the world in a million ways, one of which was that books stopped selling. So on December 21st, 2001, I get a call from my editor saying, bad news, Tony, books aren't selling, and we got to figure out a way of dealing with it. So what we're going to do is we are going to hold every writer absolutely accountable to handing in his book on the exact day it's due. If you don't, we'll take back the advance and we'll cancel the book. Merry Christmas. I'd written 8 pages at that point, and I had 90 days left. That's a tough one. So what do? Well, the natural thing for most people would be you push harder. You spend more hours, right? Bigger challenge, bigger demand, put in more hours. Hook yourself up to an intravenous feeding tube so you don't have to worry about eating. Put a cot by the side of your desk so you can literally fall into it when you finally get too exhausted to write any longer. Pop back up when you're ready. That's sort of, pull a series of college-style all-nighters. Here's what I did. Knowing what I know about the ultradian rhythms and what I've been talking to you about, I woke up at the same 7 o'clock I had always woken up. I had traditionally worked 12 hours a day on my books. This time I woke up at 7 o'clock. I work out of my home. I wrote from 7 till 8:30. Not a surprise, right? An ultradian, what I would call an ultradian sprint. 100% engaged, no email, no voicemail, no interruptions. At 90 minutes, it's 8:30, I go downstairs, I have breakfast. That's a form of recovery. I spend time with my family. That's a form of recovery most of the time. At 9 o'clock, I go back upstairs. I work for another 90 minutes the same exact way. At 10:30, I come down. I do some weight training to change channels, and I do the deep breathing exercise I just did with you. Recovery, disengage, change channels. At 10:30, I go back up. I write till noon. That's my third ultradian sprint. At noon, I go out. I take a run. It turns out that when you run, your brain, not only do you switch channels, not only are you in recovery, you're building capacity physically by moving, but you are recovering mentally and emotionally by changing channels. It's a very reliable way to recover. So I run for several miles, but one of the bonuses is I get my best ideas while I'm running. Why? Because the brain is in recovery. The brain has shifted from left hemisphere dominance to right hemisphere dominance. And so the ability to think outside the box versus very focused. I mean, where are you when you get your best ideas? Where are you? Shower, running, diving, walking. Where aren't you when you get your best ideas? Sitting at your computer. So why wouldn't we build that intentionally into our lives? If we know, why make it serendipitous that you happen to get it when you are in the shower or you're running? Why not build that in as a time that you use that period to get your best ideas? So I got that understanding in a clear way during my runs, because in fact I had to start running with a little tape recorder, because otherwise it was such a state-specific experience. It's like a dream. You'd have these ideas. If you waited till the end of the run, they'd be gone. Yeah. So, because it's coming from a different place. That's the proof that it's coming from a different place. So I came back, I had lunch, I read the newspaper, I went back to work at 1 o'clock. I worked till 2:30. 4 ultradian sprints, 6 hours of work. I stopped at 2:30, didn't write another word for the rest of the day. I wrote the book in 90 days. Well, what does that tell you? What that tells you is when you manage your energy efficiently, you get more done in less time at a higher level of engagement, and you get a life as a bonus. That's the deal.
Another thing that you mentioned when I heard you talk that was interesting, it influenced me in a different way because it was coming from a different perspective, was when you expend your energy and you expend a lot of it negatively, you're not expending the same amount as when you're expending a lot positively, that you're expending it inefficiently.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I was talking about, I wish this was the one time I've wanted to have a slide. I'm not a big fan of slides, but this particular slide would have been helpful, and we call it the energy quadrants. You can actually draw it on right in front of you. You can't draw it on your computer unless you're more adept than I am, but just draw a vertical axis and a horizontal axis so you have 4 quadrants. And at the top of the vertical axis put high, H, and at the bottom put low, and On the horizontal axis on the left side, put negative, and on the right side, put positive. So those are the 4 energy zones we all experience depending on the circumstances of our life. So the upper right one is high positive. That's where you perform at your best. Those are where all those adjectives you came up with fit. The place where most people, what do you think the lower right is? What would you call that zone based on what I've said today? Yeah, the renewal zone, the rest zone, the recovery zone. That's the one where most of you are spending almost no time at all. But I hope by what I've said so far, you've started to think, this might be a good place to be spending more time. So now we got to ask ourselves, well, when you're not in the high positive zone, we know you're not in the low positive zone because you all don't spend much time there. Where are you when you're not in the high positive zone? This is what you were asking about. Well, most people are spending most of their non-high positive time in high negative. High negative is the survival zone. We go to the high negative zone when there is a sense of threat or danger. It's the fight or flight experience. And again, I can't be impressed enough by how powerfully physiology runs our lives. When you move into the fight or flight zone, the fight would be anger, frustration, irritation, upset, defensiveness. Flight would be fear, anxiety, retreat, and so on. When you move into that zone, which is what happens when you feel a sense of threat or danger, and we feel those at various times every day, you become a different person. Now, I don't mean that like, you're not as nice. I mean you are controlled by and a reflection of a totally different physiology. You move from parasympathetic arousal and the dominance of the prefrontal cortex to sympathetic arousal and the dominance of the amygdala. You move from reflective to reactive. You move from intentional to automatic. And all kinds of physiological things happen that are great if there is a lion charging at you, because they are designed to get you to move reactively and quickly. If there's a lion charging at you from that side of the room at us, one of the things that Eben and I do not want to do is say, we're in the middle of this discussion. I wonder how long it's going to take for that lion to get here, and how much more time could I talk? You just want to run like hell. That's what fight or flight does. But in reality, there aren't many mountain lions coming at you in your life. There are a lot of metaphorical mountain lions, and your body doesn't make any distinction. So every time you feel a sense of threat or danger, that fight or flight reaction is triggered. It drains your energy. It's an incredibly intense energy drain to be in that state. It's all those hormones, adrenaline and cortisol and noradrenaline, and they burn you down very quick. It's like a gas-guzzling car. That state is antagonizing to other people. Energy is contagious. So what you're feeling, other people will feel. If you are their boss, they'll feel it even more because of your disproportionate power over them. So it's antagonizing other people. It makes it impossible, as somebody said back here, to think in a clear way. You're not You're not able to think. When your prefrontal cortex shuts down, so you won't think. So you won't say, about that lion, I don't know how long it'll take. The body doesn't want you to think. So you can't think well, you can't relate well, and you can't do anything for very long. It's a really crummy place to spend a lot of time. It's great as an alarm clock. It's great to wake people up. That's good if you're asleep. But for any sustained period of time spent in the high negative zone is not serving you well. It's a poor investment of your time and your energy. And yet we spend tons of time there. It's, to me, such an unbelievably simple but interesting insight to say to yourself, hey, this isn't about whether you're justified in being angry at this situation. This is about whether being angry serves you well. If you practice anger, if you get angry a lot, do you get the anger out? No, you're practicing anger. What you get good at what you do a lot. So if you're frustrated and impatient all day, you get good at frustration and impatience. If you are someone who moves your attention as a multitasker from object to object to object, you get good at fractured focus. But you're not good at absorbed focus. Whatever you do gets stronger. Whatever you don't do gets weaker.